The asteroid belt around Zerath Prime was a silent graveyard. Sharp rocks jutted from the darkness like broken teeth, spinning slowly in the cold emptiness of space. Few dared to come here, not even scavengers, for the Baron's reach was long and his punishments were cruel. Among the rocks, a small pod floated, battered and smoking. Inside it, Lyra, daughter of the Baron, struggled to breathe. She was weak, but her mind raced, refusing to surrender to despair. The last thing she remembered was the betrayal. Her father, the mighty Baron of the Zerathi Dominion, had left her here, abandoned. She had defied him, not with words, but with action. She had tried to stop one of his cruel plans, one that would have enslaved an entire mining colony. For her disobedience, he had sentenced her to death by exposure in the asteroid belt. Her pod had been set to fail, and her father had turned away without a glance. Lyra gritted her teeth. She refused to die, not yet. Her fingers trembled as she activated the pod's emergency beacon. She knew the odds of anyone finding her were slim. The signal would barely make it past the dense asteroid field. She felt herself drifting in and out of consciousness, visions of her father's cold face haunting her. But somewhere in her mind, a spark of hope remained. If she could survive, she could seek justice. She could make him pay, not with violence, but with his own arrogance. Hours passed. The darkness around her pod seemed endless. She could hear nothing but the soft hiss of leaking oxygen and her own shallow breathing. Then, faintly, a sound reached her. It was not the roar of the Baron's patrols or the echo of distant explosions. It was something human, the steady pulse of a ship's engine growing louder as it approached. Commander Elias had been exploring the outer sectors, mapping uncharted systems. He had seen many strange things in his career, but the blinking emergency beacon on the edge of the asteroid belt caught his attention immediately. He adjusted his course, guiding his small scout ship through the labyrinth of rocks. He had trained for search and rescue missions before, but never for something like this. When he reached the pod, he opened it carefully, expecting nothing. Instead, he found a young woman barely conscious, her silver hair floating around her pale face. She opened her eyes just long enough to glare at him, defiance clear despite her weakness. "Who are you?" she whispered, her voice hoarse. "I'm Commander Elias," he replied gently. "I found you, you're safe now." She did not fully trust him, and yet she had no other choice. Her body was weak, but her mind remained sharp. "I am Lyra," she said, "daughter of the Baron." "You were left to die," Elias said softly. "Why?" There was a fire in her eyes, a determination he recognized in the humans he had served with, yet it was different, alien, sharper, honed by a life where survival had been her only teacher. "You want revenge," he said, "but against him alone it is impossible. You can see what others cannot. I can give you knowledge. Together we can bring him down." Merging minds was risky. It could be disorienting, painful, even deadly. But the thought of gaining access to secrets of one of the most powerful tyrants in the galaxy was impossible to ignore. With careful steps, Elias activated the interface. The alien technology hummed, and he felt a strange pull at the edge of his consciousness. Then, slowly, Lyra's thoughts brushed against his mind. They were soft at first, just impressions, flashes of memory and knowledge. Her fear, her hatred, her careful calculations, all mingled with his own. It was disorienting. He saw visions of the Baron's fleets, his weapon caches, his political alliances. He felt Lyra's strength, her memory of betrayal, and her refusal to die. And then, just as quickly, their minds stabilized, finding a rhythm, a shared understanding. Elias realized he could now access what Lyra knew, and she could move and act through him, guiding him as needed. I can feel you," he whispered, awe in his voice. "And I can feel you," she replied in his mind, a faint smile brushing her consciousness. "We are stronger together." When they finally left the pod, navigating through the asteroid belt, they moved as one. Elias piloted the ship with Lyra's guidance, avoiding collisions, plotting courses through the labyrinthine rocks with near-perfect precision. He realized that the human ingenuity he had always relied upon was now amplified by Lyra's experience and knowledge of her father's world. They reached a quiet system nearby, a small station on the edge of human-occupied space. Here, Elias and Lyra could rest, plan, and prepare. The station commander, a gruff man named Kale, eyed Lyra suspiciously but accepted her story. He had seen humans and aliens work together in unexpected ways before, but never anything like this. Lyra did not speak much, but her presence commanded attention. Even from a weak body, she exuded confidence and strategy. Elias watched as she quietly studied maps, listened to reports, and made suggestions. Her mind, even while healing, was a weapon. As night fell on the station, Elias and Lyra sat in the observation deck looking out at the stars. Elias could feel their bond more clearly now. It was more than a shared goal. It was a shared understanding of survival, intelligence, and patience. He realized that defeating the Baron would not come from brute force, but from strategy, cunning, and careful planning. Lyra broke the silence. "My father is ruthless," she said, "but he is arrogant. He believes no one can match his power. That is his greatest weakness. Then we exploit it. We find the cracks in his empire and we push until it falls." One day, while scanning communications from a nearby colony, they discovered a mining world where the Baron had enslaved workers to extract rare minerals. Lyra's face darkened. "This is where he tests loyalty. He punishes failure with fear. That will give us an edge." Here was a human born among fragile mortal beings, paired with an alien who had faced betrayal and death at the hands of the most powerful Baron in the sector. And yet together they were unstoppable. Outside, the stars shimmered coldly, indifferent to their plans. But inside the observation deck, a quiet determination burned. Lyra and Elias were no longer prey. They were partners, a single force with a shared mind and a shared purpose. The Baron had left his daughter to die, but he had underestimated her, and the human who would help her survive. As the small ship accelerated into the darkness, Lyra whispered not to Elias but to herself and him at the same time, "Let him come. Let him see what happens when he ignores those who refuse to obey." Their minds were intertwined, yet they were still two separate beings, each stubborn in their own ways. Sometimes Elias would hesitate in thought, unsure if he was thinking for himself or following Lyra's guidance. Sometimes Lyra would push too hard, sending ideas faster than Elias could process. They learned quickly that patience was as much a weapon as courage. Lyra taught Elias about the Zarathi Dominion's structure, about how the Baron's fleets were organized, and how his officers followed orders out of fear rather than loyalty. She explained the complex chain of command, showing him the weak points where human ingenuity could make a difference. "Every empire has cracks," she said, "even one that seems perfect. You just have to find them before the cracks find you." He was learning not just about alien strategy, but about the art of subtlety, patience, and intelligence. Their first test came sooner than expected. While scouting a small Zarathi outpost on a nearby moon, they discovered that the Baron's patrols had tightened. He had noticed anomalies in his communications. Lyra's presence was hidden from him, but her survival had already sent ripples across his network. The patrols moved faster, questioned more carefully, and scanned for irregular activity. Elias gripped the controls as Lyra guided him through the asteroid debris surrounding the moon. "Slow down," she whispered in his mind, not out loud. "The sensors pick up energy spikes. We don't want to draw attention." Inside the outpost, they discovered a group of oppressed workers, exhausted and fearful. They were forced to mine a rare mineral that powered the Baron's weaponry. Lyra's heart ached at the sight, but she kept her emotions in check. Showing desperation could endanger them all. She whispered to Elias, "We can help them, not by fighting openly yet, but by giving them hope. Hope is more dangerous to the Baron than any weapon." By the time they left, the workers were inspired. Whispers spread about the mysterious human-alien team who had been there. The Baron could not see them, but he would feel their influence. And that, Lyra explained, was exactly the point. Over the next days, Elias and Lyra practiced constantly. They simulated battles in virtual space, tested their ability to react to threats, and refined their communication. Their connection allowed them to share thoughts instantly, sometimes finishing each other's sentences or anticipating moves before they happened. "You think too much," Elias said one day, frustration in his voice as they practiced evasive maneuvers. "You overanalyze every detail." Sometimes action is better than thought. Their minds were synchronized, but their strengths complemented each other. One night, while observing a patrol route near the Baron's mining colonies, Lyra felt a pang of anger. The patrols were harsh, beating anyone who faltered. Children worked alongside adults in the mines, and the cruelty was unbearable. "We cannot wait forever," she said to Elias. "We must strike soon. Even a small victory will send a message." Humans and aliens alike listened to their plan, inspired by the stories of a brave daughter and a clever human who refused to bow to tyranny. Slowly, a network of resistance began to form. During this time, they learned more about each other's worlds. Lyra spoke of her childhood in the Baron's palace, where obedience was survival and defiance was death. She had been trained to read people, to anticipate betrayal, to survive situations where others would perish. Elias shared stories of human resilience, of ingenuity, and of the ability to adapt in the face of impossible odds. Lyra marveled at his ability to improvise, to turn ordinary objects into tools or weapons. One evening, while they were preparing for another scouting mission, a sudden alert rang through the ship. The Baron's forces had discovered a supply convoy nearby. Elias and Lyra realized immediately that this could be an opportunity. By intercepting the convoy, they could gain resources and demonstrate to the oppressed workers that the Baron's power was not absolute. They planned meticulously. Lyra mapped the convoy's route, predicting patrol patterns and weak points. Elias prepared the ship, equipping it with devices to disable sensors and communications. They even designed a simple trap, a diversion that would confuse the Baron's forces long enough for them to escape with minimal risk. When the day came, they executed the plan flawlessly. Lyra guided Elias through dangerous asteroid fields, through narrow passages where only their combined skills could navigate. They intercepted the convoy without being detected, disabling ships silently and taking control of the supplies. For the first time, they felt the thrill of victory, not the destruction of enemies, but the reclaiming of justice for those oppressed. As they returned to the hidden station, Elias looked at Lyra. "We did it," he said, smiling. "We actually did it." They recruited more allies, both human and alien. The network of resistance grew, and with each success, the Baron's influence began to waver. Lyra and Elias discovered that their combined abilities were more than just tactical. They inspired courage. People saw them, heard their stories, and began to believe in the possibility of change. One night, Lyra looked at the stars, thinking about her father. His cruelty had been absolute, yet it had created the opportunity for something new. She realized that surviving him had taught her resilience. Sharing her mind with a human had taught her trust. And now, together, they had the power to challenge even the mightiest forces. Elias joined her at the observation deck, quiet but attentive. He had grown since the day he found her, not just in skill, but in understanding. He realized that human strength was not just in weapons or numbers, it was in intelligence, courage, and the willingness to fight for what was right. "Do you think we can really stop him?" he asked. Lyra's gaze was steady. "We have to. Not just for me, but for everyone he has hurt. And yes, because together we are stronger than he ever imagined." Outside, the galaxy moved on, unaware of the storm brewing in the shadows. The Baron continued his rule, believing his empire unshakable. But hidden among the stars, a human and an alien worked together, blending strategy and ingenuity, patience and courage. The first seeds of rebellion had been planted, and the Baron had no idea that they were growing. Elias felt a surge of confidence as he piloted the ship through the asteroid belt once more. Lyra guided him silently, her presence a steady force in his mind. Together, they were unstoppable. Each challenge they faced, each obstacle they overcame, brought them closer to their ultimate goal, justice for the oppressed, and a reckoning for the Baron who had thought himself untouchable. And as they left the hidden station, slipping silently into the blackness of space, Lyra whispered to Elias in the quiet of their shared mind, "Let him come. Every move he makes, we will be ready. Every plan he thinks is secret, we will know. He has left me to die, but he has created his own downfall." She was no longer a pawn. She was a strategist, a leader, and with Elias, a force that could challenge even the mightiest tyrant in the galaxy. The galaxy might still be dark, full of fear and oppression, but in the hearts of those who refused to submit, a new light had begun to shine. Together they would bring that light to the Baron's empire, and no one, not even the most powerful tyrant, could stop it. The mining colony on Viridian IV was a grim place. Smoke rose from jagged furnaces, and the ground was scarred from centuries of digging. Workers moved in silence, their heads down, fear etched on their faces. Guards patrolled the area, their weapons glinting under the artificial lights, enforcing the Baron's harsh rules. No one dared to resist, at least openly. Lyra and Elias watched from a small, hidden ridge overlooking the colony. From this vantage point, they could see everything: the patrols, the work schedules, and the transport routes that moved minerals back to the Baron's fleet. For Lyra, seeing her father's oppression in action was painful, but she forced herself to remain calm. Every detail mattered. Every observation was a potential advantage. "We need to start small," she said, speaking directly into Elias' mind. Her voice was calm but firm, a sharp contrast to the emotions threatening to rise. "Our goal is not to destroy the colony tonight. It is to show that resistance is possible. Even a single act can spark courage. These lines carry the mineral from the mines to the storage area. If we disable them briefly, it will disrupt operations without harming anyone. Workers will see that the Baron's control is not perfect. Sparks flew in a controlled manner as conveyor belts slowed and then halted completely. Guards noticed immediately, but they could not identify the source of the problem. The operation was silent, precise, and untraceable. Inside the colony, whispers spread quickly. Workers noticed the interruption and exchanged cautious glances. Fear and hope mingled in their expressions. Lyra watched the reactions carefully. This was the first ripple of change, subtle but significant. Next, they focused on communication. The Baron had strict control over messages, but Lyra's knowledge allowed them to tap into hidden channels. They broadcast short, encrypted messages to workers, encouraging cooperation and caution. The words were simple, designed to build confidence rather than incite chaos. "You are not alone," one message said. "There are those who fight for you. Watch carefully and be ready." Guards became frustrated at inefficiencies, unable to understand the source. The Baron's influence felt less absolute, and Elias realized that Lyra's intelligence was shaping an invisible movement, one act at a time. But the Baron did not stay blind for long. From his flagship, he sensed disturbances in the colony. The pattern of minor malfunctions and unusual worker behavior suggested interference. He summoned his advisors and military commanders, demanding answers. Lyra's careful planning had not gone unnoticed, but they were still too far away for him to act effectively. "That is good," Lyra whispered. "He is reacting. That means our influence is spreading, but we must be careful. His response will be severe." Elias learned quickly from Lyra's experience. He had always relied on instinct and improvisation, but here, every move required foresight and subtlety. Lyra's guidance was like a map through a dark labyrinth. He began to anticipate her instructions before she gave them, understanding her thought process. The bond between them deepened, a blend of strategy, trust, and human ingenuity. One afternoon, while observing the colony, they noticed a young worker being punished unfairly by a guard. Without thinking, Elias suggested a plan. "We can intervene without revealing ourselves," he said. Lyra considered it, nodding slowly. Using a combination of human devices and alien knowledge, they triggered a brief power outage in the sector where the guard was operating. Lights flickered, alarms went off, and in the confusion, the guard stumbled and lost control. The worker escaped unharmed, and the other workers watched silently. They understood the message. Help existed even in the shadows. Lyra smiled faintly. "Small victories build courage. That worker will remember this. Others will notice too." Fear begins to weaken when people see hope. A patrol captain, more clever and observant than the others, began noticing patterns in the malfunctions and disruptions. He reported the anomalies directly to the Baron, describing a force that seemed to anticipate the patrol's movements and actions. Lyra realized that the captain was a threat, not physically dangerous, but capable of unraveling the careful work they had done. "We need a distraction," she whispered to Elias. "Something that will occupy him without causing panic. We cannot allow him to expose us." Lyra and Elias used this opportunity to reinforce their operations, spreading messages of hope and preparing additional minor disruptions. The plan worked perfectly. The captain was fooled, his attention drawn away from the real efforts. The workers, noticing the continued disturbances and subtle assistance, began to whisper among themselves. Confidence grew, and small acts of quiet rebellion started to appear. Miners slowing work intentionally, guards being ignored in moments of opportunity, and messages passed secretly from one worker to another. Lyra observed the changes carefully. "This is exactly what we need," she said to Elias. "The Baron cannot control everyone. Even his strongest men cannot suppress hope." They had become more than two beings. They were a single force of intelligence, courage, and determination. But as their success grew, so did the Baron's awareness. From the flagship, he issued new orders: increase patrols, intensify surveillance, and crush any sign of defiance. Lyra and Elias knew the next phase would be dangerous. They had done enough to inspire hope, but now the Baron would respond with force. Their actions had been subtle so far. Soon they would need to act directly, testing not only their skills but also their courage. Elias looked at Lyra. "Are we ready for that?" he asked. Lyra's eyes were steady. "We must be," she replied. "The Baron will not wait, he will strike. But we are not alone, and we are prepared. Everything we have done has led to this moment." The next day, they put the first phase of their plan into action. A small supply convoy carrying minerals and equipment left the colony. Lyra and Elias intercepted it silently, disabling the guards without detection. The convoy was redirected to a hidden location, providing essential resources to the workers. The operation was precise, efficient, and completely nonviolent. Workers discovered the supplies the next day. Murmurs of amazement spread quickly. The Baron's control was not absolute. People began to believe that resistance was possible. And in the shadows, Lyra and Elias watched, their minds in perfect sync, knowing that this was only the beginning. Over the following weeks, their operations became bolder. They sabotaged key supply lines, disrupted patrol schedules, and continued to spread messages of hope. Every act, no matter how small, weakened the Baron's grip. Elias marveled at Lyra's brilliance. Her ability to anticipate threats, plan contingencies, and inspire courage was unlike anything he had encountered. He realized that human ingenuity, combined with alien knowledge, was unstoppable. One evening, as they rested on the ridge overlooking the colony, Lyra spoke softly. The Baron believes power comes from fear. He does not understand that courage can spread silently, unseen. We are planting seeds of change, Elias. One day, those seeds will grow into a storm he cannot control. Then let's make sure that storm comes sooner rather than later. As night fell over Viridian IV, the stars above seemed brighter, as if acknowledging the spark of rebellion igniting below. Lyra and Elias, bound by shared purpose and shared minds, knew that the Baron's empire was not unshakable. Change was coming, and with it, the first taste of freedom for those who had long lived under fear. And in that quiet darkness, a single thought resonated in both their minds. They were no longer prey. They were the beginning of a force the Baron could not imagine. The Baron's flagship hung above the mining colony like a dark shadow, a looming reminder of the power he commanded. Every patrol, every order, every ship in the fleet was his eye and his hand, enforcing fear across the system. But Lyra and Elias had changed the rules of the game. What the Baron did not yet realize was that the daughter he had left to die was alive, and that she shared her mind with a human who could think in ways the Baron could not predict. Lyra watched from the ridge as the Baron's forces moved to increase security. Patrols doubled, weapons were deployed to every corner, and sensors scanned constantly for any disturbance. The oppressive presence was heavy, but Lyra's resolve did not waver. She and Elias had prepared for this moment. All their training, planning, and subtle rebellions had led to the point where they could act openly. "We cannot stay hidden forever," she whispered to Elias. "He will tighten control until the colony is a prison. We need to strike now, not with guns, but with strategy, with intelligence, with courage." Using a combination of human engineering and Lyra's knowledge of alien systems, they deployed small devices that mimicked communications from officers. False orders were sent through the Baron's channels, sending patrols in the wrong directions, drawing them away from key locations, and creating gaps in the defenses. The Baron noticed immediately. From the bridge of his flagship, he roared in frustration. "Who dares interfere with my empire?" His advisors trembled, unable to provide answers. He ordered more patrols, more surveillance, more punishment. But the subtle sabotage had already planted doubt. Even his most loyal officers began questioning what was happening. Lyra and Elias did not stop there. They coordinated with the workers in the colony. Miners began slowing production deliberately, not enough to provoke violent retaliation, but enough to show that the Baron's control was weakening. Transport schedules faltered, patrol routes became less predictable, and whispers of rebellion grew louder. One day, as they observed the colony, Elias noticed a patrol captain who was unusually cautious, trying to anticipate patterns in the disruptions. He warned Lyra, "This one is clever. If we are not careful, he could expose everything we've done. We cannot risk open conflict yet." While he investigated, Lyra and Elias focused on strengthening the rebellion, guiding workers, intercepting transport routes, and gathering intelligence on the Baron's fleet movements. It worked. The captain fell for the trap, leaving key areas unguarded. Workers began acting more boldly, quietly resisting the Baron's rules in small ways. Lyra and Elias watched as their influence spread. Courage, once suppressed, began to grow like a quiet fire, but the Baron was not blind. He grew suspicious of the anomalies in his systems and the whispers of rebellion among his subjects. He had underestimated his daughter's survival, and now he began to realize that she had formed an alliance with the humans. His anger was immense, and he vowed to crush the threat personally. Lyra felt the tension rising. "He will come," she said, "and he will bring everything he has, but we are ready. The strength of humans and the courage of those oppressed can challenge even the mightiest force." Lyra and Elias knew that a head-on fight would be dangerous, but they had a plan. Using their shared mind, they coordinated a series of traps and diversions, using the terrain of the asteroid fields and the layout of the colony to their advantage. Elias maneuvered the ship with precision, while Lyra predicted the movements of the enemy. Mines were deployed, communication signals jammed, and decoy ships guided the Baron's fleet into areas where they could be slowed or delayed without destruction. It was not a fight of weapons alone. It was a battle of intellect, strategy, and unpredictability. From the Baron's flagship, he watched in fury as his ships became entangled in what seemed like an invisible web. He could not understand how a single human and his own daughter could outthink him at every turn. Frustration burned in his chest, but he refused to retreat. He increased pressure, sending more forces, demanding obedience from the colony and threatening death to any who resisted. Lyra and Elias had anticipated this. They focused on protecting the workers and ensuring that no lives were lost unnecessarily. Small victories continued to inspire courage. Guards were misdirected, shipments were rerouted, and communication among the Baron's forces was disrupted. During one intense confrontation, a group of elite enforcers entered the colony to hunt down rebels. Lyra and Elias guided the workers in hiding, using tunnels, abandoned buildings, and clever diversions. The enforcers moved through the colony in confusion, unable to find their targets. Every movement was calculated, and every decision was made using the combined intelligence of human ingenuity and Lyra's insider knowledge. By the end of the day, the enforcers were forced to retreat. The workers emerged, emboldened by the knowledge that resistance was possible. Lyra and Elias shared a quiet moment, observing the courage that had been sparked. "This is what matters," Lyra said. "Not destruction, but the knowledge that they can stand." He sent his personal flagship closer to the colony, preparing to confront Lyra directly. He underestimated human creativity and overestimated his own power. Lyra knew that the final confrontation was coming. She and Elias spent the next hours planning every detail: escape routes, signals, contingencies, and timing. They had no illusions. The Baron's power was vast, and the coming battle would test everything they had learned. When the flagship descended, the tension in the colony was palpable. Guards and workers alike watched, some in fear, some in anticipation. The Baron's presence was overwhelming, but Lyra and Elias did not falter. Their minds worked in perfect sync, calculating, anticipating, and preparing. The first engagement came with precision. Using hidden devices and clever manipulation of the colony's systems, they disrupted the Baron's ship's sensors. Lasers misfired, engines overheated, and communications were scrambled. The Baron's fleet became a disorganized mess, unable to respond effectively. Inside the flagship, the Baron's fury was unmatched. He could not understand how two beings, one human and one alien, had orchestrated such disruption. He ordered boarding parties, determined to capture Lyra and crush Elias. But Lyra and Elias had anticipated this. Using hidden tunnels and escape routes, they guided the workers and themselves through paths the Baron did not expect. The confrontation reached its climax when Lyra finally stood before her father in a secure chamber. He could see the defiance in her eyes, the courage that humans had inspired in her, and the intelligence that had allowed them to outmaneuver him at every turn. "You should be dead," he said, rage in his voice. "You were abandoned, left to die. But you underestimated me, and you underestimated what humans can do when they choose to stand together. You taught me cruelty, but we have learned courage. You taught me fear, but we have learned hope. Your empire is not invincible." They did not strike to kill, they struck to control, to prevent the Baron from harming anyone. The combined force of their minds, strategies, and courage was unstoppable. Meanwhile, the colony began to rise. Workers, guided by subtle signals and the lessons of previous acts, moved in coordinated defiance. Patrols were misdirected, supply lines cut, and communications jammed. The Baron's own subjects were turning against him, not with weapons, but with courage, intelligence, and careful planning. In the end, the Baron was forced to retreat. His flagship, powerful as it was, could not overcome the coordinated efforts of two minds working as one, aided by the courage of those he had oppressed. For the first time in his life, he faced defeat, not by brute force, but by ingenuity, strategy, and the unbreakable spirit of humans and allies who refused to bow. Lyra and Elias watched as the Baron's ships withdrew. The colony erupted in cautious celebration, workers embracing each other, realizing that freedom was possible. Lyra smiled, feeling a sense of fulfillment she had never known. She had survived betrayal, mastered fear, and with a human partner had turned hope into reality. Elias turned to her, awe in his eyes. "We did it," he said softly. "Together." Courage has a ripple effect, and the galaxy will never be the same. True strength came from knowledge, strategy, and the hearts of those willing to fight for what was right. As the sun rose over Viridian IV, Lyra and Elias prepared to rebuild, to inspire, and to continue guiding the colony. They knew the Baron's threat was not gone, but they had proven that even the most powerful could be challenged. And in that moment, a quiet truth settled in both their minds. Together, they were unstoppable. The Baron's flagship retreated to orbit above Viridian IV, but the war was far from over. His face was a mask of fury, and his advisors trembled at the thought of the rebellion's success. Every minor disruption, every act of courage by the workers, had become a thorn in his empire. He could no longer ignore the human who had helped his daughter survive, nor the daughter who had become more than a pawn. She had become a strategist, a leader, and a force he could not control. Lyra and Elias watched the flagship from the safety of the hidden station. The colony below was no longer silent. Workers moved with purpose, quietly organizing, communicating in secret, and preparing for what they all knew was coming. The Baron would return with everything he had. Elias adjusted the ship's sensors and looked at Lyra. "He'll hit hard. We have to be ready. That is the most powerful weapon we have." Then, step by step, they devised strategies to turn the Baron's own strength against him. The first move involved the workers themselves. Lyra sent subtle signals to key individuals in the colony, guiding them to take action in ways that seemed spontaneous but were actually carefully planned. Some sabotaged supply lines, others misled patrols, and a few even created false reports to the Baron's officers. Each act built tension and confusion within the ranks, making the Baron's forces appear incompetent. Next, Elias focused on the fleet. Using a combination of human engineering and Lyra's insider knowledge, he prepared devices to disrupt the flagship's sensors and communications. The plan was to prevent the Baron from coordinating effectively while they carried out their operations on the ground. Lyra's mind synchronized with his, offering real-time guidance. Every calculation, every adjustment made their actions faster and more precise. As the Baron prepared to strike, he was unaware that his own arrogance had created vulnerabilities. He believed that fear alone could maintain loyalty, that intimidation was enough to crush resistance. He had never considered that courage, combined with strategy and intelligence, could match and even surpass brute power. When the Baron's fleet entered the system again, Lyra and Elias were ready. They moved swiftly, disabling sensors, misdirecting patrols, and intercepting communications. The flagship's weapons misfired, engines faltered, and the Baron's officers struggled to maintain control. Chaos spread among the fleet, but there was no violence toward the workers. Every action was precise, calculated to achieve victory with minimal risk to life. Lyra and Elias descended to the colony once more, guiding the workers directly. Together, they led small teams to secure strategic points, block transport routes, and ensure that the Baron's forces could not easily regain control. The workers, inspired by the duo's previous successes, followed instructions without hesitation. For the first time, they acted not out of fear, but with courage and purpose. The confrontation reached its climax when Lyra faced her father once more. The Baron had boarded the colony with a small elite force, confident that he could crush the rebellion quickly. He confronted her directly, his eyes blazing with fury. "You have ruined everything," he roared. "I left you to die, and now you dare defy me. But that choice created the strength you never expected. I have survived, learned, and now I lead. Your empire is not absolute. Your fear is not enough to control those who refuse to obey." They guided the workers and each other flawlessly, outmaneuvering the Baron's forces. Each step, each tactic, demonstrated that intelligence and courage could defeat sheer power. During the battle, small acts of bravery from the workers made the difference. Miners rerouted transport lines, guards hesitated when confronted by organized opposition, and technicians disabled critical systems. The Baron's elite force found themselves confused and disorganized, unable to predict the movements of those they had underestimated. Elias intervened carefully, using technology and strategy rather than brute force. The goal was clear: disable, misdirect, and outthink the Baron, not to harm unnecessarily. The combination of human ingenuity and alien strategy proved unstoppable. Finally, the Baron realized that brute force alone could not win. He attempted to retreat, but the colony had taken control of key exits, using intelligence and planning to block escape routes. Cornered, the Baron had no choice but to surrender, humiliated not by violence, but by the strategic brilliance of a human and his daughter. Lyra approached him, standing tall. "This is the result of cruelty and fear," she said calmly. "Those who follow only because they are afraid will always falter. True strength comes from courage, intelligence, and loyalty earned, not demanded." And now the power he had taken for granted was gone. With the Baron's surrender, the colony erupted in quiet celebration. Workers cheered, hugged each other, and shared smiles that had been hidden for years. Lyra and Elias stood together, watching as hope and courage replaced fear and oppression. For the first time, the colony could breathe freely, knowing that their lives were no longer under the shadow of tyranny. The victory was more than just tactical. It was a lesson, a demonstration of what could be achieved when intelligence, courage, and collaboration were combined. The human spirit, resilient and creative, had helped shape a future even in a system dominated by fear. The workers learned that bravery could be quiet, subtle, and still powerful. The Baron learned, too late, that power built on fear alone was fragile. Lyra and Elias spent the next days restoring order and guiding the colony toward a new system of governance. The workers now had a voice, a say in decisions, and the tools to continue defending their freedom. Lyra, once abandoned and left to die, became a leader who inspired loyalty through trust and courage rather than fear. Elias marveled at the transformation. He had seen humans achieve incredible feats before, but this was different. Together with Lyra, he had turned despair into hope, fear into courage, and oppression into freedom. The combination of human ingenuity and alien knowledge had created a force stronger than any single tyrant. One evening, as the sun set over the colony, Lyra looked out at the horizon. The workers moved freely now, carrying out tasks with confidence and purpose. The mining equipment hummed steadily, but this time it was not a symbol of fear. It was a tool for survival and progress. She turned to Elias, a smile touching her lips. "We have done it," she said. "We have shown that courage and intelligence can change even the darkest system." She realized that her survival, her partnership with a human, and the courage of the oppressed had created something greater than revenge. They had created hope. The Baron's empire, though vast, was weakened. Word of the colony's resistance would spread throughout the sector, inspiring others to question tyranny and fear. Lyra knew that challenges would continue, that the Baron might attempt to rebuild his power elsewhere, but the lessons learned here would endure. Courage and intelligence could not be erased. In the quiet moments that followed, Lyra and Elias reflected on their journey. From the abandoned pod in the asteroid belt to the hidden station, through subtle sabotage and strategic planning, to the final confrontation, they had relied on trust, ingenuity, and courage. Their bond had grown stronger, a combination of two minds working in perfect synchronization, each learning from the other. Elias looked at Lyra. "You've taught me a lot," he said. "Not just about strategy, but about resilience, patience, and hope. I think we make a good team. Not through fear, not through violence, but through intelligence, courage, and unity." Lyra and Elias stood side by side, knowing that this victory was more than personal. It was a demonstration of the strength that could emerge when humans and allies worked together, when courage and intelligence overcame fear, and when hope was stronger than tyranny. The galaxy was vast, full of systems ruled by fear, oppression, and arrogance. But in that moment, Lyra and Elias had proven that change was possible. The spark of rebellion, born in secrecy and nurtured by courage, could ignite even the darkest corners. And as they looked out at the stars, both of them knew that humanity's strength, its ingenuity, resilience, and courage, was a force that even the most powerful tyrant could not ignore. And in that truth, they found a sense of peace, purpose, and the knowledge that together, they could face whatever the universe might throw at them next. The Baron's empire had been shaken, the oppressed had been freed, and a new era of hope and cooperation had begun, guided by the bond of a human and an alien who had refused to surrender, no matter the odds. The stars outside their window seemed to shine a little brighter that night.